those of you who have been at either one of the first couple of classes will be familiar with the format that we've been using. For those who might be new along this evening, I'll begin by giving a little bit of an introductory talk for the first 20-25 minutes or so, and then we have a period of guided meditation and then time for dialogue and questions after that. Also, each of the classes has a particular theme, and ideally they stand on their own as well as weaving in together with what's already been said. So it might be that some of the things I say that it might leave a few people adrift and they're not quite sure what I'm referring to or familiar with some of the concepts or some of the language. So please feel free to look anxious and lost and ask any questions that you might have. So the theme for this evening, I believe, is knowing versus thinking. Is that right? Yes. And so there's a couple of elements to this that I thought I would outline to begin the evening with. The first is that of what is known as insight meditation, and the second piece I'd like to talk about is what we could call contemplation or investigation. So the first couple of sessions we've spent a fair bit of time looking at the qualities of focus and concentration, how to bring the mind to a single point, to train the mind to be able to attend to the present moment. But that in itself is not a particularly liberating quality. It can be very peaceful and pleasant, but there's still the whole element of understanding is not really being developed in that. So the Buddha made this kind of distinction between developing calm or a pleasant abiding. There's plenty of room up the front if you want to come in. There's some. Well, you can sit down the side here. So the Buddha made a distinction between these two levels or layers of meditation practice. The foundation being that of calm, of tranquility, focus. But then the other level, that which is truly liberating for our hearts in the deepest way, is that of developing wisdom or insight, true understanding into the way things are, the way we are, what we are, and how we fit into the universe. So sometimes these two different elements of meditation are presented as very distinct or separate. So you have that concentration practices are like this, and insight or wisdom practices are like that, and that they can have quite specific techniques involved with both of them. But my own training and the teachers that I've had over the years, Ajahn Sumedho, who's an American monk and the head of our community in the West, and Ajahn Chah, who is my teacher in Thailand, both stress that it's much more of it's like a natural spectrum, and that rather than seeing them as two separate distinct qualities, it's more like a single quality that has these sort of different phases or attributes. So just as like the blossom on an apple tree and the little kind of bud of an apple and the fully ripe apple, they look different from each other. The flower is not the same as the apple that you eat, but you can see they're also in a way they're the same apple, they're the same thing. So when we talk about developing insight, this is seeing that when the mind is calm and steady, when we attend to the present moment, then we begin to be able to let go of the particular object that we've used as an anchor. Like last week we were talking about letting go of the breath and stepping back and witnessing the, if you like, the space that the breath moves in. That's quality of spaciousness. So with what we're doing with this, developing the meditation in this way, is that as that steadiness becomes more and more firm and clear, then we can say, and that's firmly established, like the boat is steady in the water. Then, as we let go of that particular object, then we're starting to employ our natural faculties of wisdom, our kind of intuitive qualities, or that in our heart which recognizes the patterns of nature. So that we're, in a way, what we're doing is letting go more and more deeply of the content of experience, and learning to witness the process of it. So this is the way that we help this along, so that, say we've been focusing on the breath as a particular object. Once the mind is clearly established and firmly set in the present moment, we let go of, say, focusing on the breath, looking at that particular pattern, and we open the heart to the whole flow of experience. So that might be that we hear the sounds of the birds chirping, or we feel a sensation in our legs, or we have a sudden memory of our grandmother, or we're figuring out what we want to eat, what we have in the refrigerator for a snack when we get back home tonight, and all the different stray thoughts and ideas, feelings that can wander through. So we call this insight meditation, because what we're doing is, rather than then focusing upon the content and thinking, oh yeah, my grandmother, she was so nice, it's such a shame she passed away, blah, 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 and writing a whole little eulogy for our grandma, or planning our snack when we get home, or whatever it might be, we are looking at instead at the whole process of experience. So, as I said, we let go of the content rather than trying to figure out what kind of bird is that. Just to say, that's the sound of a bird. A sound arises and passes away. A thought of my grandmother arises and passes away. A feeling in my leg arises and passes away. So we look at that. We're looking at that quality of transiency, of change, and deliberately turning our attention away from the content. Even if we might find a great interest in what we're going to have a snack on later tonight. We, at least for this period of time, say, well, right now I'm not really interested in the content. I'm not interested in the fact of my grandmother, but just this thought of my grandmother has arisen. It's come into being, and it does its thing, and then it fades away. So if you imagine a sort of model of kind of letting go of being involved in the stories that the mind tells, so we're stepping back and just watching the waves of events, the patterns of experience coming and going and changing. And as we were looking at last week, we begin to find that quality of knowing, that quality of awareness, holds steady, that is perfectly still and spacious, and we can begin to witness the flow of events and patterns of thought and feeling, the world inside, the world outside. It all happens within that same spacious arena. And that when the heart is firmly established in this quality of knowing, then we find that regardless of the content, whether it's something attractive or painful, whether it's interesting or boring, whether we've had this thought 1,000 times already, we find that becomes immaterial. And we're able to, say, rest in this quality, like a spacious knowing quality, and feeling the process of experience, and not only just in terms of change, but also beginning to see the fundamentally selfless quality. Say we have a thought of our grandmother, or we have a memory of our own life, some event that only we know about. There's some unique experience that we have, a very personal memory of some kind. And then maybe we hear the sound of a bird or a car driving past. Or we can begin to notice that, well, something seems to be very much me and mine. That event, only I know that happened. That seems so much me, so personal, so much wedded to, woven into what I am. It seems very much like me, whereas the sound of a car going past doesn't feel like me at all. It's definitely out there. But as we start to let go in this way and train the heart to rest in this spacious, accepting knowing, then we begin to notice that, hey, isn't that interesting? This very personal memory and the sound of a car, they both arise and pass away. They both happen in the same space. One I call inside, one I call me, the other I call outside, and I call it the world. But those values or those labels, they're just something tacked on the outside. And when we step back far enough, we say, well, isn't that amazing? This personal thought, this deep emotion, this random noise, they arise, they pass away. They're all patterns of nature, arising and ceasing. They all do their own thing. They come into being, and we begin to intuit. We're awakening that intuitive wisdom of the heart that says, hey, these are all just patterns of nature. Some I call me, some I call the world, some I don't know what to call them. Don't know whether they're inside or outside or what they are. But something in our heart begins to know that. And when we begin to know that, particularly when we start to let go of taking things so personally, we remember some kind of wonderful, blissful experience or some great achievement, that moment when we were truly loved. And then we get all kind of glowing and gooey and sweet. One of those delicious moments when we got it right. And it was a perfect moment. And then we remember some terrible shattering experience where we got it all wrong, and it was the breakup, the failure, and it's a moment of terrible pain. Some incredibly mundane thing, it's the sound of a car going past, or something intrusive, like some of the classes we had last autumn. We had these wonderful beeping noises. They were very good teachers. The uncontrollable beeping, and men with screwdrivers charging around trying to make the beeps behave themselves, which they refuse to do. So, we begin to see that whether we call something inside or outside myself or the world, something in our heart awakens to the fact that calling it self, calling it other, calling it inside or outside, those are just conventional designations, and actually it's really just patterns of nature coming into being, doing their thing and fading away. Now, also maybe I should have prefaced this evening, as I've done most of the others, with saying that what I say is not I'm not putting it across as some kind of doctrinal, dogmatic truth that people are supposed to believe in, but Buddhism is very much a path of investigation, finding out for ourselves. So when we have the guided meditation period, perhaps we'll be able to kind of explore and tap into this and see if we can discover the same kind of quality for ourselves. Because this isn't just like a neat little mind game where we're trying to just sort of rearrange the patterns of our thinking or our experience just for the hell of it. Got nothing else to do with a Thursday evening. Nothing on the TV or the... the point of this is that this revisioning of experience can have a very radical way very radical effect on the way we experience who and what we are, because we find that as my teacher Ajahn-Amaro would say, was that as soon as I think about myself, I feel depressed. This is a great meditation master, sort of famous, sort of dazzling guru type. He says, as soon as I think about myself, I always feel depressed. And you might think, well, boy, has he got a problem, But it's interesting. As soon as we think about me, as soon as we look at life in terms of what I like, what I want, what I am, what I could be, what I should be, what I might have been, what I might still be, then there's a kind of contraction. The self-contraction happens. And when we we shift that and we stop thinking in terms of like my life, my hopes, my fears, my problems, and that me-ness and my-ness and I-ness, then we start to think in terms of nature as a whole. Even as I'm saying these words, and I must have said them 1,000 times before, maybe you can also feel that nature has a kind of naturally spacious and calming quality to it. And when I say me, there's a sort of stickiness and a kind of density. At least that's how I experience it. And so, even though we spend a lot of our life trying to be free, that Mendocino County, this sort of epicenter of counterculture, the escapees from the Bay Area in the 60s and 70s, we all came up here, many of us. And so freedom is and just in the sort of the founding of America, freedom from the tyranny of the British, present company accepted, of course. Even though Mary and I both have the same accent. Actually, we come from the same county, and we found out, when were we talking? We probably rode our ponies in the same horse shows when we were... probably even raced against each other in gymkhanas when we were little scruffy characters in the southeast of England. Just found that out last week. So not all teachers of Oriental spirituality in Mendocino are British. So we long for freedom, but what we begin to find, and what this kind of meditation helps us to discover, is that I can never be free because I'm always there. That we're trying to find a place or a position or a livelihood or a relationship where I am a free person. But what we don't notice is that the I is actually the prison. And so the person can never be free because the person is the prison. So one of the ways I like to think about it is like if you think of the I as the bars of the jail. A lot of this practice is to do with learning to see the feeling of self as something that's transparent. We're not trying to make the ego into the big enemy. Say, if only I didn't have an ego, I'd be fine. And trying to sort of make the ego into a kind of evil monster that we want to get rid of. The ego is very useful. The self is a very handy little social tool. Like Ajahn Chah would say, if we were all just called person, it'd be really hard to get around and say, oh, person. We wouldn't know who should respond if we were all just try to do away with identity on a social level. And when you get pulled over on the highway and the policeman says, what's your name? Or you ask for your ID, you say, ID, I don't have one. I don't have an identity. They say, okay, get out of the car. Hands on the roof, troublemaker. So we use an identity. We employ that to get by in the world. But we begin to see with this kind of meditation, we start to investigate that feeling of I-ness and me-ness and my-ness is actually transparent. It comes into being and it fades away. It's like any other shape in nature. So that as we develop this kind of meditation and start to see more and more layers of what we think we are, the memories, the thoughts, the moods, the feelings, the ideas, we begin to see, that's not really entirely who and what I am. I call it my thought, my mood, my past. But what is that minus? What is it that knows that feeling of I and me and mine? And when we begin to just reflect on it and work with it in that way, what we will begin to see is that there's a quality of relief and ease, that, that's not really completely who and what I am. That's just passing patterns of experience. So one of the last things I want to say in this is that in Buddhism, the Buddha was quite determined to not create an idea of what we really are. So if I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my body, and I'm not my ideas, I'm not my moods, I'm not my achievements or my crimes, all my problems, then what am I? What is the self? Well, the Buddha kept saying that this is the wrong question. That rather than trying to define what we are, just learn to let go of what you're not, and then the reality of things will become apparent. As soon as we try to define what I am in our essence, then we put another fence around it. So it's kind of frustrating in many ways. And sometimes the people would beg the Buddha, look, if you know, just tell us. Look, can't you give us a straight answer? These shaveling Buddhists, you can't get a straight answer out of them. So the Buddha was absolutely resolute in saying, no, the important thing is to just train the heart to be that knowing. And then the reality of what is the fundamental nature of what we are and what all things are will become apparent. But that reality can't be put into concepts or words. And just to say a little bit about contemplation, this quality of knowing, usually when we think about knowledge or ideas, we are an understanding. We very much arrange it in terms of thinking and having a good conceptual map. When we start to meditate, we begin to notice that the thinking can go like having 3 or 4 radios on simultaneously, all on different stations, just jabbering away. And so we begin to think, wouldn't it be nice if I could just stop thinking, just switch the whole lot off? Wouldn't that be peaceful? So sometimes meditation can come across as a sort of anti-thinking program. And it's true that we want to train the mind to calm down and to be focused so that we can reduce the thinking somewhat, or even make it quiet occasionally. But thought is an extraordinarily useful tool. And I found for myself a couple of well-placed thoughts can save us weeks of grief. Oh, I'm not getting what I want. Therefore, I'm suffering. Right! Meanwhile, you've been grinding away at some agony for a month or two. So when we talk about contemplation, it's not just it's not a trying to sort things out logically, but it's using the same kind of spaciousness, this quality of openness. So when the mind is focused and steady, it's like as a spacious, open, embracing quality to that attention. We're not focused on one particular object like the breath. There's an openness. And when we talk about contemplation, it can either be in terms of, say, a thought or a feeling that arises naturally, or it can be something that we pick up and investigate as a theme. Say, we notice that we're terrified of dying, or that we get very excited by a particular kind of experience, or that we find ourselves, feeling most real and most whole, say when we're helping someone else. Any attribute of our life, or some aspect of spiritual teachings. So what we do with contemplation then is, having established that kind of open field of experience, rather like a sort of fertile field or a fertile space, then we can either a thought that arises naturally, or just one that we drop in there. And so that we're allowing that intuitive wisdom of the heart then to be seeded by that thought. Like, why is it that when I get praised, it feels so good, and that when I get criticized, it's the worst thing in the world? What is that? Anything of that nature, just to drop that in. So it's like you're dropping that question or that reflection into this pool, and then watching what crystallizes from it. So this is very different from trying to figure things out logically. It's a much more spacious process. And so that when one contemplates in this way, then as like a emergence of that thought or that pattern, it takes shape for a moment. And then, because our heart is of the same nature as the universe, if you like, so in the Buddhist language we'd say Dharma, that the fundamental nature of our being is the Dharma, that reality. So that then that reality of our own being is intrinsically related, connected to the nature of all things. So that we're tapping into that intrinsic attunement to life. And so that sometimes we can ask a question like that, what is this about? How does this connect with that? And sometimes immediately something will rise up and say, well, it's no surprise because of A, B, or C. And you go, oh, right, never thought of that. Other times it might be, don't know. That is a mystery. And I was talking about this earlier today with some people, certain aspects of my life or my character or aspects of the teachings that I would look at, and it would just be like staring into the mist, like this sheer fog. Like, okay, we've got about 2-foot visibility here. I know that it's foggy. So the difference between contemplation and ordinary conceptual thought then is that we find that rather than trying to fill up that mystery or that not knowing with an idea, with a belief, with some logic, we find the heart is much more at ease with leaving it open. Don't know. It's a mystery. Because we're coming at it from the level of the heart rather than from the ego or the thinking mind. So the ego doesn't like the unknown. It wants to fill it up with the belief to make ourselves feel secure. The heart itself is much more at ease with that, and so the unknown we experience as mystery, as a feeling of wonderment that we experience. When the ego meets with the unknown, it experiences fear, anxiety, terror. So that in a way, the fundamental distinction that in both of these elements, with contemplation and with insight practice, the distinction between what we can call thinking and knowing is that the knowing that the way we use the word knowing in Buddhist practice is, it's not knowing about. It's not having some facts. It's the quality of awareness itself. So that just getting that much into our consciousnesses or understanding is the key piece. Because we usually think of knowing as being having the data, having a pattern, knowing how something works. But there's a whole other level of knowing, which is what we aim to establish the heart in, which is the pure awareness, that an intuitive wisdom that is like the alive, pattern recognizing quality of our being, that which is intrinsically attuned to the whole of living universe. So we'll have a period sitting meditation now, so if people would like to stretch your legs for a minute or so, just to ease your joints.
It seems like language is so concrete, a choice of a word here, a choice of a word there, that it's always pushing one to concretize things instead of be more spacious about them. And even when you're trying to meet that challenge, leave space and detach.
We can end up with the word space.
They seem almost contradictory.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's like you're using words to get to the place beyond words. It's like using language to describe that which is beyond language.
It's that awareness that makes me really understand, at least the sense of where the Gnosticism would have a really strong part. Because as long as you're in the world and they do things with words, they're like these little pitfalls. Every other word, just waiting. Got you by the ankle. Have you?
But it must be that way in the monastery too.
Can be.
Unless everyone's quiet.
Well, I guess that's why I was thinking of something where there was a lot more silence, and then you just the insight.
Right, you got a lot more cues, reminders, telling you everywhere, everything's saying remember, 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 remember. You're Deborah's husband.
Correct.
Remind me of your name.
Ricardo.
Ricardo.
I experienced today. I was like, I'd say to him, no, that's not true. Let's try again.
I'm bringing the attention into the body first of all. Just noticing how we're holding ourselves, how the body feels. And then gently from that starting point, let's let the body stretch upwards, the spine straightening somewhat, helping to bring a quality of attention, alertness to the mind. And then with the spine as the central column, the axis of the body, so the rest of the body soften, relax around that. Befriending our own body, allowing it to be at ease, to settle. Letting the body be at ease with itself, noticing if there's any kind of tension in the muscles of the face or the shoulders, stomach. Wherever you find any kind of tension, just gently let yourself relax there. Let the muscles soften around the eyes and the mouth, letting the shoulders drop a little, letting the belly loosen, spread, fully at ease. And we perceive the body here within the space of our awareness. This faculty of knowing is operating all the time. But first of all, just focusing on the body and then narrowing that attention. Once the body is well settled and the posture is firm and steady, narrowing that attention to rest upon the breath. Not so that we change it or make it longer or deeper or not controlling it in any way, just feeling the body breathing. Just letting this simple rhythm be the very center of our attention. As if the mind were a great open field, a great space. Placing this little cluster, this pattern of sensations that the breath makes, right here at the very center, like we're the center of a mandala or a flower. Just feeling the body breathing. Following each inhalation from beginning to the end. Each exhalation from the beginning to the end. We hear a sound. The mind jumps upon it and gets carried away. A stray memory, an idea, echoes of the day we just been through pop up. The attention gets pulled this way and that. So we work with the mind with a kindly and gentle attitude, cooperating, collaborating with the mind, not pitched against it, fighting it. As we find the mind has drifted off and run away, as soon as we notice that, consciously, gently, just loosen your hold on whatever it is the mind has grabbed. Relax, let it go. Come back to the center again. Let the sounds that we hear, the thoughts and feelings of the body, let them just be around the periphery. Let the breath, this little cluster of feelings, be there, the very heart of our attention, a focal point. Slowly training the attention to rest more and more steadily in the present moment. Thoughts of the past happen here and now. Ideas of the future happen here and now. Just let them come and go. For the time being, just let the attention rest with the breath. And you find that the mind is getting a little more steady, rests more easily in the present moment. There's still sounds that we hear and feelings that arise. Now let go of the feeling of the breath as a central focal point. So we've been placing the attention on this cluster of feelings of the breath here in the center of this space of our awareness, the open field of the mind. So letting go of that as a particular focus, as if we were stepping back, and it's letting the breath be one more object, one more pattern of experience, taking shape in the field of the mind. As the sound of my voice, the weight of your body on the ground, sounds of cars and birds, and people, different thoughts and moods, feelings of tiredness or inspiration, memories, plans. Letting the heart rest in this quality of knowing, observing, feeling the flow of that, this whole pattern of experience. Letting go of the content, letting go of the stories, just to witness it all, know it all as patterns of nature taking shape, arising, changing, fading. As being that spacious knowing that embraces it all, welcomes it all in, as if the heart were breathing every moment in, knowing it, letting it go, breathing it out. To help provide a little leverage on thoughts and perceptions and feelings, you can just use a little reflection like, it's changing, let it go. Is this really mine? Let it go. These are patterns of nature. Let them go. And as we develop this, then we see the effect on the heart that this kind of relinquishing, this releasing has on us. If you find the mind easily gets lost and carried away and swept up in the current, just re-establish the attention on the breath for a moment or two. Come back to the body, see what the posture is doing. Let the body relax and straighten. Refocus the attention on the present. Then when it's re-established, let go. So we're guiding the mind, guiding our hearts towards just simply being this knowing quality. Taking in the pattern of each moment. Not grasping hold, not pushing away. As we learn to let go, then noticing how does a thought, which we call inside, really differ from a sound which is outside? A feeling of minus, here-ness and there-ness. Noticing these are other simple patterns. Who does it belong to? What is it that owns it? And as we let go, as the heart releases, notice what that feeling is like. Not even clinging to a sense of I or me or mine. Just a simple, pure, open knowing. Aware of everything, attuned to it, letting it all go. This is not an easy practice to do, but even if just for like half a second or less, if just for a quarter of a second, actually the Buddha said even for a finger snap, if there was, just for that long, there was a recognition, oh, look at that, inside, outside, it all just happens here. Oh, absolutely everything is changing, and nothing really has an owner. Oh. In one of his teachings he said, if someone made offerings of incredibly valuable gifts to support a spiritual community with a fully enlightened Buddha at the head, that would not be as spiritually beneficial. You wouldn't be as much good karma involved in even that great gift as if you brought forth loving kindness in your heart for as long as the time it takes to milk a cow, about 20 minutes. And that even more beneficial, even more kind of expansive good karma is created by holding in being the insight into change for a finger snap. So rather than buying out the whole of Safeways and offering them as a gift and thinking of the good karma that you're making, all you need is like one finger snap of clarity, of that kind of moment of relief. So this kind of practice is called vipassana, which is probably a word many people have seen or heard. And vipassana just means looking in, insight. Vi means inwards, and passati is the verb to see. So when we look inwards, then the looking inwards is the vipassana, but also that the change of heart, the insight itself, that realization of freedom, of inner spaciousness, that quality, that is the insight which is the most important piece. The sort of the methodology of the looking is one, but the change of heart is another of the meanings of the word. So I'd like to just open things up now for any questions or dialogue or things that people want to bring up. But you can have a little leg stretch. I must not overlook people's sore knees. So if you need to stand up and stretch for a moment, please do. I've been sitting on the floor for so many years, I have to keep remembering how agonizing it was for the first decade. So please, it's a completely open forum, so anything that people want to bring up or any queries or doubts, no question is too stupid or is sort of out of order. So whatever will be helpful to ask about, please feel free.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why do you ring
If you can speak up so everyone can hear.
Yes. Why do you ring the gong at the end and not at the beginning?
Well, the beginning is kind of obvious by saying, okay, let's have the period of sitting meditation. So in a way, that's the beginning signal. This is how it's done in my tradition. And then when everyone's sitting quietly with their eyes closed, then I've never found a way of finishing things verbally other than by chanting that sort of meshes the mood of the quiet sitting with the more interactive spirit. So sometimes if I haven't got a bell, I'll just chant something, do some of our traditional chanting, and it just seems a very lovely way of signaling. Hello everyone, where are you? I think in the Zen tradition, they always ring the bell at the beginning of the sitting and at the end as well.
It's all clear now.
Great. That was easy. Yes.
Of the 3 times that you have been here, I have the feeling that you use the word heart and mind. Seems like interchangeably sometimes. Could you speak a little bit about the difference, or is there a difference between the heart and mind?
Did everyone hear the question? So, asking about the different usages of the words heart and mind. Well, the words have different connotations in English, and in the Buddhist language, Pali, you have several words, 3 main ones: mano, chitta, and vijnana. Generally speaking, the word mind has the connotation of mental activity. So in the common usage in English, and we think of, oh, my mind, or she's got an incredible mind, means like she's smart, or she knows a lot of facts. And then the word heart has a naturally sort of warm and expansive quality to it. So that I use them fairly interchangeably, but I find myself using heart more and more. Like, if you use a word like mindfulness and heartfulness. So in just recent times, I've been experimenting with, like in Buddhist tradition, we talk a lot about mindfulness being a sort of crucial quality of paying attention to the present moment. And so that one of the key meditation teachings in our scriptures is called the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So I've begun to toy with rendering that as the 4 foundations of heartfulness, because it's in a way that the brain is a useful character, but it does tend to co-opt a lot. Right, but the word mind often gets associated with brain activity, and so that if the brain's got half a chance, it'll kind of wade in and grab it, sort of grab the show, and so that oftentimes people can relate to mindfulness as as a very sort of head-centered quality. It gets a bit cramped. Whereas if you say heartfulness, or the heart, then it's in a way bringing the center of gravity a bit lower, and it's all very flexible. Often, many Buddhist texts and the word mind in Buddhism is often used implying sort of mind with a big M, and so that sort of ordinary mind they might call discriminating mind. And then the more expansive mind, or what you might call the heart, would be sort of mind with a big M, or they use terms like original mind. So like in the verses of the 3rd Zen patriarch, it says, to seek mind, big M, with the discriminating mind is the greatest of all mistakes. So it's like the wave looking for the sea. It must be around here somewhere. Its wetness is everywhere. So that in a way you have to sort of figure it out from the context. In the Tibetan tradition, they tend to talk about mind with a small m as meaning discriminative mind, and then they would use a term like mind essence, meaning heart or the kind of expansive quality. But generally, there's like a distinction between those 2 faculties, that quality of transcendent knowing, which you call kind of big mind or heart, and then the discriminative, particular conceptual mind. And so most Buddhist traditions will make those distinctions, and you have to sort of keep your ear cocked to figure out exactly how the words are being used. curious as to were people able to follow that meditation? Yeah. And how many? I won't. No, you won't be. There'll be no. There's no exams or marks given. But just curious how many people experienced at least a finger snap of that kind of quality. Yeah.
What I found shifted the quality was when I held a thought like heart. Is that an aspect of meditation? Is the whole thought?
Well, that's like contemplation. But I was saying that is like when a theme arises on its own, and it might not even be verbal. It's just, and you can, in a way, I was talking with this woman in the front row just in the little break about how words are so sort of clunky that we need them to communicate. I mean, it might be very esoteric if I just came and sat here and just was for 6 Thursday nights, in Ukiah. Come and be with Ajahn-Amaro. Simply being. Oh wow, amazing. But the talking is kind of handy. But the talking, the words can only take us so far. So we might use a word to lead us into that space. So like just using a word like heart. Then the idea is then to use the word like scaffolding. Like actually, we're just visiting the new space where we're going to have the event on the 2nd, hopefully. But Ron Moe, who's the creator of the space, is here, and there's scaffolding that's up in the space to do all the painting and all the kind of woodwork, and so that you use words like scaffolding. You put them up to work on the space. But then if you leave the scaffolding there, then it'd be a heck of a job having a yoga session with all the scaffolding.
She could be quite handy.
You're ruining my theme. So, you use the words like scaffolding. You put them in place to get the job done, but then you move them out of the way. Because the point is getting the job done, not having the scaffolding there. So you use a word. You might use a word like heart to kind of bring it that to counteract the sort of the busyness or the fragmented quality, or just to remind you of that fundamental spaciousness. And then you leave the word alone. The word helps to open up the space, and then just leave it. And then the point is then to just allow the awareness of that space to percolate, to be known.
You mentioned the word intuition. It's contemplation and looking at a question and seeing what intuitively arises. Could you talk a little bit more about what is intuition?
Could people hear that? She was asking about, so I've been using the word intuition somewhat, and so Mary was asking, what do I actually mean by the word? Well, I alluded to it a little bit in the opening piece, that our minds are intrinsically intelligent. Even you. Even me. The big end. Yeah, we have there's a natural quality, an aspect of our being, which recognizes the patterns of the universe. Because if you think about it, I mean, the whole sort of Judeo-Christian inheritance is one of sort of me being separate from the rest of the world and feeling alienated. But the kind of thing that this sort of meditation practice and these teachings point to is that you get more and more to the realization, well, how could I be separate? Every breath. I mean, we've been exchanging body parts ever since we came in this room this evening. I've been breathing in bits of you and you've been breathing in bits of me. It gets a little bit kind of unsavory. But that's the fact, right? That what makes the oxygen me? I mean, that is the you come in here and think, oh, this is the sun house. And then, well, what was the air in the space of the sun house is now I call Ajahn-Amaro. This is me, and then I breathe it out, and then you breathe it in, and then it's Sarah, and it's James, and it's Ricardo, and it's Mary, and it goes into the carpet, and we call it the carpet. You know, we're the line between what is me and what is not me, just on a physical level, starts to blur. And then we begin to see, as we explore the mind in a similar way, that we begin to see the barriers between the mental and the physical are also kind of arbitrary in some respects. So that we begin to see that, well, how could my mind, or what I am, be somehow intrinsically and absolutely disconnected or different from everything else? How could I be the one thing in the entire universe that does not belong to nature? And that's kind of arrogant, or really deluded, or really extreme, isn't it? I mean, it's a strange thought. On a psychological level, we can feel like that. Everybody else is part of the natural order except me. You know, I'm the one wrong piece. You know, when you think it through, even when you say it, it's ridiculous, it's farcical, but emotionally we can feel that way, can't we? So with this practice, what we're doing is we're opening up to the fact that our nature is intrinsically inseparable from the rest of nature. And the place where that's most completely connected is on what we call the level of the heart. So that the essence of my mind, my being, what I am, is, or the nature of this being, how could that possibly be separate from the nature of all of the rest of us? It's one nature. It's one fundamental natural order it's in relationship with itself constantly. So, when we talk about intuition, what we are doing is we are like plugging into the port. So the heart is like your server, the telephone exchange in old parlance, or your server in the more kind of cybernetic age. So that's where your connection to the web is based. So that you connect. So by just tapping into that fundamental quality of our own heart, then tapping into our own nature, then that nature is intrinsically connected to all nature. And that even though our brain might not be able to figure out what's working or what's happening, our heart is connected to that. And so we intuit. The heart knows what's the right thing to do at each moment. So that rather than trying to just figure everything out by logic, or doing things out of habit, or what fits our opinions, or what everyone expects, or being guided by the other dozens of different ways that our actions and views can be guided, when we open up to this kind of inner intelligence, this inner wisdom, intuitive wisdom, then we ask a question like, well, what's the right thing to do here? Then we're drawing upon that intrinsic attunement, that connectedness, that unity of our nature with the nature of all things. And so even though we might not be able to figure it out, or we might be in a doubt about what to do, then what might arise is like, don't do anything. Or like, move now. Or, it's really not clear. There's no answer. And then what you find is that because that's not coming from a place of reasoning or of habit, but it's coming from a direct attunement to the here and now. It's rather like what guides a musician when you're playing music. It's like, you can't figure out what all the other instruments are doing. You can't quite tap into all the different shifts of mood of all the other players. You can't do the calculations, but you can feel it. If you're in a sport, any of us who have ever played sports or been in dancing, near this kind of very physical, mobile, active qualities, something in you knows what to do. You're able to attune to the situation, and as soon as you start to think about it, off it goes, right? don't think, Luke, use the Force. And he makes his shot. I mean, that's obviously an old movie, and it's kind of, and of course he makes his shot because otherwise the movie would end badly. But that's what we're, in a way, is doing, is like we're drawing upon that natural attunement, and that we are, say, you can call it your higher nature or your divine inspiration or whatever. I mean, you can call it what you like, really. As Ajahn-Amaro once said, you can call it Montgomery if you like. No, Montague, excuse me, it was Montague. Call it Montague if you like. You can call it, the divine inspiration or guidance by God or the goddess or by the great whatever it is. Or you can just call it your intuitive wisdom. It's just that quality that is able to guide and to steer. And so what you find is that the more that you like, also another expression I use, which is a little bit new agey, but I'll go with it anyway, is just consulting your own oracle. Because that's really what you're doing. It's like, if you don't consult the oracle, you don't get the feedback, But if you just take the trouble to make that kind of inquiry, and it needs to be not in just a blur of mental activity and verbiage, but in a quiet moment and with a clear direction, like, what is the right thing to do here? What do I feel about this? And you can do this in business meetings as well as, in the meditation hall. Like, what is going on here? What are they talking about? Does this ring any bells? How many of us have been there? And then that sense, and we can just call it what you like, but that sense of really knowing. And because it's not coming from habit, it's coming from a direct attunement, then we find we can trust it. And can be guided by that with a much greater surety than if we've thought our way to a solution. Because if we think our way to a solution by weighing pros and cons, there's still a doubt. It's still like we're trying to think our way to the end of uncertainty. And it's just like a courtroom battle. The other lawyer will always come up with an argument. Like, it's just like, A and B sparring with each other. And as soon as you've piled up the evidence, say, okay, definitely, this is the right thing to do. Yeah, but on the other hand, And even when you really force a decision, then they go to appeal. And round it goes again. But rather than trying to think our way to the end of a doubt, or trying to figure out what to do, or what's right, or what's going on, just by, in a way, listening to your own heart, just drawing upon that inner wisdom, then numerous times I've found when I take the trouble to do that, it's like, well, just don't bother, dummy. Leave it alone. Oh, or like, there's no answer. Stop worrying. Or another an interesting one that sometimes arises is wrong question. So it's a tremendously important quality. So there's various different words for it in Buddhist practice. So we call it prajna or panya, wisdom, or lokutra panya, transcendent wisdom. These kind of words. And it's not like you need to have a whole kind of big setup. Like I say, you can do this in business meetings. It just takes like a moment to reflect, to look within, and as long as we're sort of direct and clear in that moment, then what will arise you will come from that, will resonate that same kind of clarity. Does that make sense? I mean, I think as human beings, this is familiar to all of us, and every culture relates to this in different ways. And you either have the ancestors talking to you, or the messages from above, or whatever. We articulate it in different ways, but the process is kind of identical.
Does that mean that is this the same as Buddha's nature, which is inherited in all beings? Is that the same? Or?
Yeah, the Buddha means the one who is awake.
Right.
So the Buddha who lived 2,500 years ago is like an embodiment of that quality. But as my teacher Ajahn Chah would always say, the Buddha. People often say the Buddha passed away 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, but the real Buddha is alive today, because the Buddha is that quality of wakefulness, that quality of wisdom, which is in your heart. And so that when we draw upon that Buddha wisdom, we can consult the Buddha any time. If we don't make the effort to consult, then we won't get the advice or the guidance. So that Buddha nature is that faculty of awakenedness that we can employ. Of course, we can go through life without employing it, but just having it buried in layers of habit and compulsion and busyness and fear and laziness and everything else. But if we take the trouble to draw upon it, to recognize it, and to open it up, then it can be what guides our lives very directly.
So it's not the same as you were mentioning intuitive.
Yeah, I would say that Buddha wisdom is that same intuitive wisdom. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's like, or you can call it by different names. It's that quality of knowing. So it's like knowing. It's rather like putting on a shoe, and it fits. You don't have to think the shoe fits. You know it fits before you articulate the word. So it's that knowing that which is wordless, essentially. It's that quality of awareness itself.
It doesn't have to. It applies to all beings, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're an animal, it's a little bit more densely buried under the layers of instinct. And the great benefit of a human life is that we have the faculty to not just be conscious or be alert, but they have this more reflective capacity. We don't just know, we know that we know.
How does having a center with 10,000 Buddhas relate to this Buddhist?
Well, them, like any Buddhist monastery, the sort of power source of the spiritual life is, in a way, this quality that lies at the heart of everybody who lives there. And in all the different multifarious ways that a spiritual community might function, they're trying to support or draw upon or open up this quality, and to encourage it within each person who lives there, and to encourage the awakening of that, the arousing and development of that in other beings. So it's the City of 10,000 Buddhas has a huge range of activities, and it's the biggest Buddhist monastery in the USA. Little did you know, on your own doorstep. It's Ne plus ultra. They are a really big show, and they have many, many dimensions to their way of life. But in essence,
I don't mean to pick on. I just use that as an example.
Yeah. So just in exactly the same way, our monastery or any Buddhist monastery, it's like aiming to be a center of wakefulness. So we've come to the end of the evening again. So 9 o'clock has raced into our presence. So I think Mary made enough of the announcements at the beginning. Also, one thing that we should mention, that we haven't mentioned so far, is that every Saturday evening at our monastery up on Tom Kai Road, there's a meditation and an instructional talk. And also, we follow a lunar calendar. So on the 4 quarters of the moon, we also have, those evenings we have meditation, communal meditation, chanting, and an instructional talk. So people are completely welcome. The monastery is always open. Yeah.
What time is the Saturday evening?
They always begin at 7:30. So please just show up. You're more than welcome. 16201 Tom Kai Road. It's got this wonderful retaining wall. Also built by Ron Mo and his crew. Just by the big turnout. About 4 miles down Tom Kai. Big turnout on the right, and there's a retaining wall and a sharp right-hand turn. You have to kind of hook in. Before then. Yeah. It's just pretty much exactly 4 miles from the beginning of Tom Kai Road.
And when is the other one you do that you invited us to? The lunar, what did you say?
Begins at 7:30 as well. Yeah, no, it's on the moon. You have to keep an eye on the moon, or look at our calendar. 2 half moons, the new moon and the full moon. So Sunday is the full moon of May, which is also a big Buddhist festival, major Buddhist festival day. The birth, enlightenment, and passing away of the Buddha all happened on the same day. And it's full moon of May, which is this Sunday. So we're having a memorial ceremony for our neighbor at midday, and then in the evening we'll have the gathering. There's also, because it's one of the festival days, we'll have a candlelit circumambulation. 7:30? Everything is 7:30. All teachers are English, and everything begins at 7:30. Okay, good night.